All right, now we're going to talk about how to actually solve equations by completing the square. So you can complete the square to solve quadratic equations. And remember before when we factored or solved by graphing, we always set it equal to 0. Well, here we want to set it equal to the x squared and the bx. In other words, get the x squared and the x term on one side. So if I want to solve this one by completing the square, I'd subtract the 12 to the other side so that I have the x squared minus 6x on one side. And then you complete the square on the left side. But be careful, there's one little thing, little tweak you have to do, and it's very important. So if you take half the middle term and square it, so half of -6 is -3, square it, you get 9. You have to add that on. But since you're in an equation, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other in order to keep it equal. So you add 9 to both sides. Okay, that was the little tweak that you have to do. Okay, not a big deal, but it's super important. If you don't add that to both sides, you're never going to get the right answer. Okay, so you simplify that a little bit, you get 16, and the left side is x minus 3 squared. Again, half the middle term is -3, and that's what you do. You have x minus 3, quantity squared is the factored form of the left side. 7 plus 9 is 16. Now you can solve this. Since the left side is a binomial squared, you could just take the square root of both sides. Don't forget, when you take the square root, you have to account for the possibility that it could have been positive or negative. Because remember, when you square a positive or a negative, it always gives you positive. So whether you had 4 or -4, squared would give you 16. So if you reverse that, square root of 16 could be 4 or -4. So you have those two possibilities. So you have x minus 3 equals 4 or -4. So you add 3 to both sides and you get x equals 3 plus 4 or 7. Or you get x equals 3 minus 4 or -1. Okay, those are the two solutions. So let's try this one together before I let you do one on your own. Okay, so in this case, we want to subtract 3 from both sides. So x squared minus 12x equals 5, so that you can complete the square with the left-hand side. Now, if I take half of 12 and square it, that would give you half of -12, rather. That would give you -6 squared, which is 36. So I'd have x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 5 plus 36. Okay? Now, if I factor the left side, it's going to be x minus half the middle term, or 6, squared, equals 41. Now, you take the square root of both sides, and you would get x minus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 41. Then you add 6, and you would have x equals 6 plus the square root of 41, or x equals 6 minus the square root of 41. Okay, so then you could use your calculator and figure out what 6 plus the square root of 41 is, which would be about 12.4 if you round to the nearest 10. And if you did 6 minus the square root of 41, you would get about -0.4 if you round to the nearest 10th. Okie dokie? All right, well, here's a couple for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, we're back. So notice in number 5 and 6, actually, both of them already are solved for the x squared in the x term. So you just have to complete the square. Number 5, if you take half of the coefficient of the x term, so half of 4 is 2, square that, you get 4 again, and add that to both sides. So you get x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 6 plus 4 would give you 10. Factor the left side. So since the left side is a perfect square trinomial, we made it into one. You just take half the middle term and add it to x. X plus 2 squared equals 10. So x plus 2, you're taking the square root, equals plus or minus square root of 10. So that means your answer is x equals -2 plus the square root of 10 or x equals, that's an R right there, -2 minus the square root of 10. In either case, if you plug it into your calculator to see what the decimal would be, you would get -2 plus square root of 10. So the -2 plus the square root of 10 is about 1.7 if you round. And then -2 minus the square root of 10 gives you -5.2 if you round there. Let me just double check something. This is actually 1.2. Okay, so let me write that a little bit more neatly. You get 1.2, or x is about -5.2. Okay. All right. Number 6. Take half the middle term and square it. Half of -8 is -4 squared. You would get plus 16. So -9 plus 16 is going to give you 7. Okay, so this would be x minus 4 quantity squared. And remember, take half of the middle term, and that's what you're going to add or subtract to the x in the factored form and write it squared. It's subtraction because the middle term is subtraction. Okay, equals 7. So you take the square root, you have x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 7. So you would add 4 to both sides and get x equals 4 plus root 7, or x equals 4 minus square root 7. Now, just as a reminder, that is the exact form. If you left it like that, that would be the exact answer. Okay, oftentimes we're going to ask you to round to the tenths. So if you put that into your calculator, 4 plus square root of 7 is 6.6. So wave the equal sign because it's approximation. And then when you enter 4 minus the square root of 7 into your calculator, you get approximately 1.4. Okay, so those are your 2 answers there. Okie dokie. All right, now to solve a quadratic equation in which the leading coefficient is not 1, you have to divide each term by the coefficient and then isolate the x squared and the x terms to complete the square. So for example, if I have -2x squared plus 8x minus 18 equals 0, you have to have it just x squared. You're not allowed to have a number in front of the x squared. So what do? Well, you take your original equation and divide every single term by whatever the leading coefficient is. So we're going to divide everything by -2. So the first term becomes x squared, then this becomes minus 4x, -18 divided by -2 becomes +9, and the other side was 0 divided by -2 is 0. Okay, then from there you just do what we did previously. You subtract 9 to the other side to get the x squared and the minus 4x by themselves. And then you take half of the middle term and square it, you would get 4. So add that to both sides. And then you write x squared minus 4x plus 4 in its factored form, which is x minus 2 quantity squared. And then -9 plus 4 is -5. Square root both sides, but look at this. It's equal to a negative number. Now, if you remember, you can't take the square root of a negative number. What's that mean? That doesn't mean we did something wrong. That just means that this quadratic equation does not have any real solutions. Now remember when we solved quadratic equations by graphing and you had to look for where it crossed the x-axis? Well, this quadratic equation, I'm just going to show you roughly what it's going to look like. It's going to open downward since the leading coefficient is a -2. And since there's no solutions, it's going to open downward but not cross the x-axis anywhere. So that's what would happen in that situation there. Okay. All right, so let's look at a couple more and solve these by completing the square and round to the nearest tenth if we have to. So number 7, you have to divide everything by 4 in this case. So you'd have x squared plus 9/4 x minus 1/4 equals 0. And then I would add the 1/4 to the other side first. So x squared plus 9/4 x equals 1/4. Now here's where it can get a little tricky, but it's pretty simple. You just got to follow the steps straightforward. You have to take half the middle term and square it. Well, what's half of 9/4? Half of 9/4 is like multiplying 9/4 by a half, and that would be 9/8. If you square that, you would get plus 81 over 64. So you have to add that to both sides. Okay. Now, the factored form, remember, it's going to be x plus, because the middle term is plus, and just half the middle term, basically what you squared in order to get the constant. So it's going to be x plus 9/8 squared equals, now 81/64 and 1/4. Don't convert these to decimals. Just get a common denominator and add. So the common denominator should be 16, or excuse me, 64. So you have to multiply this one by 16 over 16. So you'd have 16 plus 81 over 64. So that's going to give you 97 over 64. Now you square root both sides and you'd have x plus 9/8 equals plus or minus the square root of 97 over 8. Since you're square rooting both sides, you can take the square root of 64, which is 8. The square root of 97, 97 isn't a perfect square, so you just leave it as square root 97. So then you add or subtract 9/8 from both sides, and you get x equals negative 9/8 plus square root 97 over 8, or x equals negative 9/8 minus square root 97 over 8. Okay. Now, if you're going to get the decimal form, be very careful when you enter these into your calculator, okay? Because you can really get lost in the calculations. If you have any questions about how to do that, how to put those into the calculator, please let me know. For this one, negative 9/8 plus square root of 97 divided by 8, you would get 0.01. You'd actually get 0.0106107225225. But if you round to the decimal, the tenths, you would get x equals 0.1. And for the other one, you would get, when you subtract square root 97, you get negative 2.4. Okay, so maybe what you could do is pause the video right here and try to put both of these into your calculator, and hopefully you were taking notes and you could write it down and see if you get 0.1 or negative 2.4. I know it's kind of jammed together right here, but if you were taking notes, you should be able to write it clearly. All right, so number 8. First thing you want to do is divide everything by the negative 2. You get x squared minus 5x minus 11 equals negative 4. Add your 11 to the other side, so you get x squared minus 5x equals 7. Take half of the middle term and square it. You would get 25 over 4. So you add that to both sides. So you have x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 equals 7 plus 25 over 4. This factors into x minus 5 halves squared equals, now the 7 plus 25/4, you get a common denominator. The 7, so you have to multiply the 7 by 4 over 4. So you would have 28 plus 25/4, which gives you 53/4. Okay, so 53/4. Okay, now you square root both sides. You'd have x minus 5 halves equals plus or minus the square root of 53 over 2. Because you can take the square root of 4, since 4 is a perfect square, and just write it as 2. So you'd have x equals 5 halves plus square root 53 over 2, or x equals 5 halves minus square root 53 over 2. Okay, if you plug those into your calculator, you'd have 5 divided by 2 minus the square root of 53 divided by 2. And that would give you approximately negative 1.1 if you round it to the nearest tenths. It's actually negative 1.14005. Then if you redo it with the adding square root 53 over 2, you get approximately 6.1. The actual answer is 6.14005. Okie dokie. All right. So here's one for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video and hit play when you're ready. Okay, we're back. Did you remember to divide both sides by 3 first? So you'd have x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 7. Then you would have x squared minus 3x equals 8. Take the negative 3, half it, square it, you would get 9/4. Add that to both sides. So x squared minus 3x plus 9/4 equals 8 plus 9/4. Factored form would be x squared minus 3 halves, not x squared. X minus 3 halves squared equals, now 8 plus 9/4. You could write 8 as a fraction over 4 by multiplying it with 4 over 4, multiplying it by 4 over 4, which you would get 32 over 4, plus 9 over 4 would give you 41 over 4. Square root both sides, you get x minus 3 halves equals plus or minus square root 41 over 2. Now remember, 41 is still in the square root because it's not a perfect square, but 4 is a perfect square, so when you take the square root of the 4 in the denominator, you get 2. So x equals 3 halves plus square root 41 over 2, and x equals 3 halves minus square root 41 over 2. Okay, so let's plug those in. So you'd have 3 halves plus square root 3 halves plus square root of 41 over 2, which gives you approximately 4.7. And then if you do it with the subtraction, you get approximately negative 1.7. Okay, so again, try entering those into your calculator and make sure you get 4.7 and 1.7. All right. All right, one more for you. The senior class at Bay High School buys jerseys to wear to the football games. The cost of the jerseys can be modeled by the equation C, where C is the amount it costs to buy X jerseys. How many jerseys can they purchase for $430? All right, well, the seniors have $430, so set the equation equal to 430, and we'll do this one by completing the square. Now, don't let the decimals mess you up. Just divide everything by 0.1, and you'd have x squared plus 24x plus 250 equals 4,300. Add the 250 to the other side, or subtract it rather, to the other side, and you get 4050. Now I isolated the x squared and the x term, so take half of the middle term, which would be 12, and square it. So you're going to end up adding 144 to both sides. So I have x squared plus 24x plus 144 equals 4194. The left side, that trinomial is a perfect square, so I can write it in its factored form, x plus 12 quantity squared. Take the square root of both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. Subtract 12. And then you get your two answers, negative 12 plus the square root of 4194 and negative 12 minus the square root of 4194. Now this is important that you get the decimals here so you can see what these actual answers are. One says your answer is 52.8. The other one says it's negative 76.8. Well, think about what x represents. in the problem. X represents the number of jerseys they can purchase. Well, since you can't purchase negative jerseys, you could just throw that negative solution away because it doesn't make sense in the context of the problem. Also, since you're talking about jerseys, you cannot buy just part of a jersey. So since it's 52.8, I know that rounds up to 53. But if you went up to 53 jerseys, you'd be spending more than $430. So the most amount of jerseys they can purchase with the $430 is 52 jerseys. Okay, I hope that made sense to you. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this section. Please reach out to me if you have any questions, and take care.